What can you say about the Resident Evil series that hasn't already been said? The franchise runs the full length and breadth of the gaming spectrum, from unadulterated classic to highly forgettable mess. A lot of hype surrounds Resident Evil games, and Village is no different, following in the footsteps of the terrifying Resident Evil 7. Supposedly I didn't play it, I'm not brave enough. On a personal note, I've always found horror movies and horror games especially painful to play. I didn't like jump scares when I was younger, but as I've gotten older I've definitely become a lot braver. For full transparency, the previous Resident Evils I've played are the original Resident Evil 1, 2, 4 and Code Veronica on the Dreamcast. All of them are fantastic, and it goes without saying when reviewing Village I was most definitely comparing the game to previous entries in the series. So without further ado, let's be brave and go into war in the mean, lean streets of wherever the hell this is.
I suppose you survived worse back in America, hmm? I like you.
The RE engine performs very well for the most part. It excels in indoor environments while doing a solid job outdoors. With ray tracing turned on, the game still runs very smoothly on the PS5, though I have to admit, I wasn't as blown away by the visual side of the game as many others are. One thing the game does get very right is the atmosphere of the village. Due to its style and art direction, the game is dripping in the blood and sweat of the lycans you are slaying. There is a nice variety in locations due to the game's progress, and the cinematic scenes are really well done. In fact, I would say the cinematic feel of the game is definitely one of its strongest points. Sometimes the game was a bit too dark for my liking in terms of the actual lighting in the game, but I still didn't find it scary. Sonically, the game does a great job of instilling fear in every footstep, especially early on. The floorboards creak above, below and all around you. You can hear exactly where something is lurking around the corner. Not enough to scare me, of course, but then again, I'm just a super brave guy. That baby is blatantly gonna fucking start chasing me, isn't it? Motherfucker! Some of the groans and moans of certain monsters send shivers down your spine. The music is your classic get the heart racing style violins. Voice acting is generally solid across the board with the odd exception. Overall, I was well and truly sold on the Village, and Capcom did a great job of immersing the player in the picture they were painting. Following on 3 years after Resident Evil 7, the game starts with a recap of the previous game, nicely setting you up for your arrival in the village. Though a touch cringy at times, overall the story of Resident Evil Village delivers. It's dark a lot of the time, not in the lighting sense, but I mean in terms of the actual content of the story, but Ethan's love of his daughter is done pretty well, and the overriding story arc packs a punch. There's enough Easter eggs in there for Resident Evil lore enthusiasts, and the cutscenes are short and sharp enough to keep you interested and advance the story nicely. I will say the game you finish is very different to the game you started, both in terms of narrative pacing and style. The further into the story you progress though, the weaker it does become ever so slightly. It's never bad, it's just never as great as the opening half of the game. Lady Dimitrescu and her castle is the high point of the story. That's not to say the rest sucks, it's just the game may have been better served on focusing on that aspect of the story, or on the castle at least. Though some areas are just as good, House Bienvenido, however you say it, I'm looking at you, some others are just not on the same level. Resident Evil Village excels when it's leaning more towards horror than action. Not because I'm scared by horror, because obviously I'm not. That baby is blatantly gonna fucking start chasing me, isn't it? Motherfucker! Jesus Christ! But because the gunplay in Village just becomes a bit boring after a while, a bit stale. Early on, when you feel vulnerable, there's something to fight for. Later on, well,
I started blasting. Bang!
the tension in the earlier sections of the game are quite simply terrifying, but in a good way. It's done via atmosphere and spine-tingling tension. Often there's nothing there, but it's the way the fear is built into you that makes it so good. Later on, this is gone, replaced with the feeling that no matter what comes your way, you'll just blast it to death. Eventually, you are literally just running a gauntlet of enemies, guns a-blazing. Sadly, the boss fights don't hit the mark either. Some were outright odd, while others felt more out of your control than they needed to be. There were bits and pieces of each and every boss fight that were good, but as a whole, they never gripped me or blew me away. The boss fights are considerably less complex than previous entries, and I don't think that's a good thing. Pacing of the game is also quite wonky. The game is much better at the slower, tightly strung together sections than any other time. Though I loved the level design, which overall is fantastic, one area in particular overstays its welcome later on. The general flow of the game involves you killing one of the 4 lords of the manors who have something you need. Put those 4 pieces together to unlock your final boss. At various parts of each lord's manor, you will meet a merchant who will allow you to upgrade your characters and weapons. It's pretty simple in terms of a gameplay loop that works at its core. It's just a shame that sometimes what was in between just felt like walking in a straight line and solving the odd puzzle. Talking of puzzles, nothing here taxed the brain or stretched the imagination. A lot of the gameplay choices in Village felt like a best of from previous games, but written by a new team that hadn't worked on those previous games. They just never capture the true magic of the previous entries, whether it's in terms of boss battles, puzzles, or tense gunplay. And that just means that they just don't pull the magic from the previous entries that they are drawing so heavily from. Now that's not to say the game didn't play well, it just doesn't play memorably. I finished the game earlier on today, and honestly there's not many parts of the game that were truly memorable, mostly because the game didn't scare me, because I'm hard. Alright. For the guy the way. Ooh, what the fuck? No, but seriously, mostly because a lot of it just felt very reined in. On a final note, I finished the game in 9 hours 40 minutes. Personally, I don't mind that game length, but it may be a sticking point for some. Resident Evil is a fun, solid entry into the franchise, but definitely sits in the middle of the pecking order compared to its predecessors. Dripping in atmosphere but uneven, partly full of fear, partly devoid of any fear whatsoever. Great characters that are given average boss fights. The game just doesn't consistently deliver on its promise. I kept waiting for the game to take me by the scruff of the neck and announce its arrival into my psyche as a great game, but it never did. If you're looking for something to play that is fun, that will make you laugh and cry and entertain you for about 10 hours, you could probably do a lot worse than Resident Evil Village. It has stiff competition compared to the previous entries I played in the franchise, which, as a reminder, was the original 1, 2, 4 and Code Veronica. Resident Evil Village sits at the bottom of that particular list. That may seem harsh, but I'm not here to lie to you. I'm feeling a strong 7 for Resident Evil Village. If you absolutely adore Resident Evil, then you can probably push that into the low 8s. Did you enjoy Resident Evil Village? Did the game scare you? Because it didn't scare me.
He said the exit's underwater.
Let me know in the comments section, and as always, hit the like button, sub and comment, or I'll send this thing to your house. Motherfucker! Jesus! Take care, stay safe. Wait, I can't remember what I opened last time. Did I open this? No, yeah, this is where I'm going. Yeah. Alright. For the guy the way. Ooh, what the fuck?